Imagine a piercing wind, 30 below. You are alone. Before you stands a mountain of muscle, fur, and fury, 8 tons of living weight. In your hand, trembling from the cold, is just a sharpened stone on a stick. Your family in the cave has been starving for days. You have only one chance. This is an image that lives in our culture, the lone hero versus the monster. But could such a duel have happened in reality? What does science tell us? The answer will surprise you. And it is far more interesting than any myth. Let's find out. To fully appreciate the scale of this duel, we must first understand who our hunter's opponent was. The mammoth is not just a large elephant. It is the pinnacle of Ice Age evolution. It all starts with its scale. Imagine 2 large SUVs stacked on top of each other. That is the approximate mass of an adult male, about 8 tons of living, enraged force, capable of sweeping a man from its path with a single step. This was the first thing the hunter saw, a mountain moving towards him. But even if he found the courage to approach this mountain, he faced the next, almost unsolvable problem: its impenetrable defense. The mammoth was a true living fortress. Beneath its thick hide was a 10-centimeter layer of subcutaneous fat, and on top of it all, a dense, long coat of fur. A simple spear with a stone tip, thrown by a human hand, would most likely just bounce off or get hopelessly stuck in this multi-layered armor, causing the giant no serious harm. And finally, even if one miraculously managed to pierce this armor, the hunter came face to face with its arsenal. Its gigantic tusks, up to 4 meters long, were not for decoration. They were powerful battering rams capable of piercing any predator. And its trunk was not just a nose, but an immensely powerful muscle capable of grabbing a man and easily immobilizing him. And to all this was added another, perhaps the most formidable factor. Mammoths were almost never alone. They lived in herds, fiercely protecting their young and their kin. To attack one meant to declare war on the entire herd. This turned an already extremely perilous duel into a nearly impossible mission. So let's return to our lone hunter. With his primitive spear against this 8-ton survival machine, what were his chances? The answer is simple and brutal: 0. It would have been certain doom. And archaeology fully confirms this. Scientists have found no evidence, not a single burial site, that would indicate a successful solo hunt of a healthy adult mammoth. The myth remains a myth. But just because it was impossible for one doesn't mean it was impossible for humanity. And this is where the genius begins. Our ancestors understood that their main weapon was not stone or stick. Their main weapon was a plan. The Ice Age man was physically weaker than almost all the large animals with whom he shared this harsh world. He could not compare with the mammoth in strength, the saber-toothed tiger in speed, or the cave bear in fury. Outmatched physically, our ancestors had to win strategically. But their superweapon was unseen. It was born not in muscle, but in a mind capable of seeing what was inaccessible to the beast. It all began with a gaze. Ancient people didn't just see tracks, they read them like a map, predicting the giant's path. They didn't just look at the landscape, they saw an ally in it, noting where a steep cliff could help in a drive, or where the ground would treacherously give way under a multi-ton carcass. But the most brilliant knowledge is useless if locked in one head. And here the second miracle was born. The ability, with a single gesture, a single guttural sound, a single glance, to turn an individual insight into a common, decisive plan. The thought of one became the property of all. And this gave rise to the most important thing: a single organism. 10 or 20 people ceased to be just a crowd. they became a single predator with dozens of pairs of eyes, but one common mind focused on victory. It was this collective intelligence that spawned 3 brilliant hunting tactics that allowed the weak and vulnerable human to challenge the masters of the Ice Age. Tactics based not on brute force, but on cunning, patience, and impeccable calculation. The first strategy was the most cunning and safest. It required not speed, but incredible patience and engineering prowess. Ancient people were not just hunters, they were architects. Knowing the routes along which mammoths migrated year after year, hunters prepared a trap in advance. This was the so-called wolf pit, a huge, deep pit dug directly in the beast's path. Its depth had to be such that a mammoth, having fallen in, would completely lose its mobility. Imagine the titanic effort it was to carve out a hole the size of a small truck in the frozen ground, using only bones and stones. But digging the pit was only half the battle. Next came the art of camouflage. The trap was covered with a fragile deck of branches and then sprinkled with snow and earth so that it blended with the surrounding landscape. Now, all they had to do was wait, sometimes for weeks. This was a hunt in which the main weapons were knowledge and patience. When the animal fell into the trap, it became completely helpless. The hunters only had to approach and finish what they had started, without risking their own lives. But what if there was no time to wait? Then the second tactic came into play, the most massive, noisy, and dangerous one, the drive hunt. Here, humans transformed into true conductors, orchestrating primal chaos. The goal was not to attack, but to frighten. Mammoths, despite their size, were cautious animals and were afraid of fire and loud noises. The hunters, divided into groups, worked as a single mechanism. One group of beaters created a wall of noise and fire, cutting off the herd's escape routes. Their task was to cause panic and direct the frenzied animals to a pre-selected point. And that point was always a natural trap that the hunters had found and studied long before the hunt began. It could be a steep cliff, a viscous swamp, a deep ravine, or a narrow gorge where the giants lost their maneuverability. In the chaos of a panicked stampede, the animals ran to their own demise. Falling off a cliff or getting stuck in a mire, they became easy prey. It was a brutal but incredibly effective strategy that required flawless coordination and a deep understanding of both animal psychology and the local topography. But the most ingenious traps were not always pits or cliffs. Sometimes the trap was space and time itself. The third tactic was a marathon of survival. It relied not on cunning or panic, but on humanity's main advantage, incredible endurance. A group of the best hunters would select a lone, weakened individual and begin the pursuit. Their goal was not to fell it at once, but to exhaust it. From a safe distance, using spear throwers, they would repeatedly hurl light darts at the giant. Each strike inflicted a shallow but weakening wound. This could go on for hours, sometimes even days. The people, taking turns, simply didn't allow the animal to rest, eat, or heal its wounds. Slowly but surely, the mammoth lost strength from its injuries and exhaustion. And only when the giant was completely worn out and could no longer resist, the hunters would approach to deliver the final, decisive blow. This was a battle not of strength, but of will. All this incredible risk, all this brilliant strategy and titanic effort were not in vain. Because a successful mammoth hunt meant more than just dinner. It meant life. The vanquished giant was a true Ice Age supermarket for ancient people. 2 to 3 tons of meat. This was enough to feed an entire tribe of 30 people throughout the long and hungry winter. It was smoked, dried, and frozen in the permafrost. Durable clothing and warm shelters. The huge hide was used to make coverings for huts that protected against the icy wind. Frameworks for homes, tools, and art. Entire dwellings were built from the giant bones. Tools, sewing needles, and the first works of art in human history were carved from the tusks. Fuel and energy. The fat was used for lighting caves and as high-calorie food. One mammoth provided the community with everything necessary for survival for months on end. It was the grand prize in the brutal lottery of the Ice Age. So, could one person take down a mammoth? No, but it wasn't necessary, because the real superweapon of the Ice Age man was not a sharpened stone. It was the ability to trust one another, the ability to create a plan and work together for a common goal. And this skill, the ability to unite to solve seemingly impossible tasks, proved to be far more powerful than any tusk or claw. It was this, in the end, that allowed us, fragile and vulnerable creatures, to conquer this planet. If you are interested in learning the truth behind this ancient myth, subscribe to the channel. There are many more secrets ahead that we will uncover together. Write in the comments what mystery of history you would like to learn about next.